Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to schools, but not just any school experience.
Mm.
We're looking at some of the more unsettling stories
Mm.
that make you want to glance over your shoulder when you're in an empty hallway.
Oh, yeah. Those are the best.
For this deep dive, we are going to be taking a cue from a YouTube video by Mr. Nightmare called 5 Most Disturbing Things That Have Happened in Schools.
Oh, wow.
Might be wondering,
Yeah.
why schools? What is it about these places that make them so good for creepy stories?
Well, schools are often these large buildings,
Right.
and they have these long corridors and classrooms that are empty for hours on end.
Yeah.
There's a real sense of history that's just embedded in the walls.
Yeah.
Generations of students and teachers and maybe even some forgotten events. It's almost like they're designed to hold secrets.
Okay, so we have the setting.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the first story. This one comes from Westland High School in Oregon, and it plays on a fear. I think a lot of us have that fear of something lurking above us.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine you're a teenager named Jack, and you've just been given a pass to use the bathroom.
Okay.
You're walking down the hallway, and you get this unshakable feeling that you're being watched.
Ooh, that feeling of unease, like the prickle on the back of your neck.
Yeah.
It's almost primal. It's like a warning system
Yeah.
that something might be off.
Jack makes it to the bathroom, goes into a stall, and that's when things start to get really weird. He hears scratching sounds coming from the stall next to him.
Oh, no.
He checks for feet under the door, but there's nothing there.
Oh, that's creepy.
So naturally, Jack looks up.
Don't look up.
He sees a hole in the ceiling, and staring down at him from that hole
Uh-huh.
is a head.
What?
Just a disembodied head with this blank expression peering down at him.
Oh, it's interesting how ceilings often figure into our fears. Like, think about basements, right? They represent what's beneath us, hidden in the earth.
Right.
But ceilings are about what's above, what might be hanging over us, just waiting to drop.
Now, I don't know about you, but if I saw a head staring at me from the ceiling, I would scream and run.
Oh, absolutely.
But Jack claims that he managed to take a picture.
He's braver than I am.
It was super blurry, but someone online tried to clean it up a bit. We won't show it here.
But
But just imagine a grainy image, that disembodied face, staring out from the darkness.
that's terrifying.
To make things even creepier, other students had reported hearing strange noises coming from that same bathroom before.
Oh, so it's not just like a one-off.
Right.
You know what I find really interesting about stories like this is the way they build on existing anxieties and rumors.
Right?
It's like the more people talk about it, the more real it becomes, even if it started as just a prank or a misunderstanding.
So was this a prank?
Yeah.
A hallucination? Or something else entirely?
Right. Like, what was it?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what makes these stories so compelling.
Yeah.
They leave us wondering, what if?
Yeah, what if there really is something lurking in the shadows?
Yeah.
Something we can't explain.
All right, are you ready for our next stop on the school spirit tour?
Lead the way. What other unsettling encounters await us?
Let's shift gears a bit and head over to Pocatello High School.
Okay.
This one isn't just a story. There's actual footage involved, unedited security camera footage that captured some seriously strange happenings.
Oh, okay. You've got my attention now caught. On-camera footage always adds a level of, I don't know, believability, even if it's blurry or open to interpretation.
For sure.
What did the cameras catch?
So the footage shows lights flickering on and off in the hallways,
Okay.
which could be faulty wiring, but then the security cameras themselves start shutting down one by one,
Oh,
as if something's interfering with them.
that's already making me a little uneasy.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling when technology starts acting up and you can't explain why.
Right.
So what happened next?
A shadowy figure appears, and it seems to be floating towards a doorway.
Before
Before it just vanishes. Witnesses described it as being tall, but it didn't resemble anyone who worked at or attended the school at the time.
a floating shadowy figure that doesn't match anyone at the school.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm officially creeped out, but maybe there's a logical explanation.
Maybe.
A prank gone wrong, some weird lighting effect.
Well, this is where the context gets really interesting. Pocatello High School has a pretty tragic past, 6 deaths and a fire over the years.
6 deaths and a fire.
Hmm.
Wow, that definitely adds a whole other layer to this story. You can't help but wonder if those events somehow imprinted themselves on the school.
Right.
It makes you think about how places can hold on to memories, emotions, maybe even energies that we don't fully understand.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with our natural tendency to look for patterns and meaning, it's easy to see how a place like Pocatello High School could become a breeding ground for ghost stories.
So are we wired to see ghosts where there might be none? Is it all just our imaginations running wild?
Well, that's a question for the ages, isn't it?
Right.
Our brains are incredible at making connections, finding patterns, even when they're not really there.
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with things that scare us.
Yeah.
Things we can't easily explain.
Right.
Sometimes we want there to be a supernatural explanation because it's easier than facing the random chaos of the universe.
Okay, I'm ready for the next story. Hit me with it. What kind of disturbing event happened next?
Okay, this one is intense.
Okay.
It takes us into the realm of the potentially demonic mayor. We're talking about a student who, by all accounts, was generally well behaved, but then one day, everything changed.
Okay, a sudden change in behavior. That's always unsettling.
Right.
Like the ground shifting beneath your feet.
Yeah.
What happened?
Out of nowhere, she starts screaming uncontrollably, seemingly at nothing. She becomes paranoid, acting as if she's someone else. Entirely doesn't recognize anyone around her, not even her classmates or her teachers.
That's chilling. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. That loss of self, that feeling of something else taking over. What did the teachers do?
As you can imagine, the situation escalated quickly. Teachers tried to restrain her while others started praying, adding this whole other layer of, spiritual intensity to the situation.
So you've got teachers trying to physically restrain the student, others praying, and the student herself screaming and acting completely out of character. It sounds incredibly chaotic and frightening for everyone involved.
Exactly, and it raises questions about the nature of belief and the power of suggestion.
Right.
Even if we set aside the possibility of demonic possession,
Yeah.
the fact that people believed it was happening could have had a real impact on how the situation played out.
It's like that idea of mass hysteria, where a group of people start experiencing similar symptoms or beliefs, even if there's no physical cause. So what happened to the student?
According to reports, she was sent to a monastery
The monastery.
and eventually recovered from this evil spirit.
So the people involved clearly believed that this was something beyond the realm of conventional medicine or psychology.
Right. And it makes you wonder, what do we do with experiences that define our understanding? Do we try to find rational explanations, or do we accept that there are some things we may never fully comprehend?
That's a question I'm still wrestling with myself. Okay, ready to move on to the next story.
Absolutely. For this one, let's travel to an abandoned school in Afghanistan. Two teenagers, armed with a camera and a lot of bravado,
Oh, yeah.
decided to explore a place rumored to be haunted.
Oh, I love a good abandoned location exploration. There's something about those empty spaces, the remnants of lives lived, that just sparks my curiosity.
Yeah.
What did they find?
At first, nothing too out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Some strange drawings on the walls, abandoned school equipment, the usual things you'd expect to find in a place like that.
Okay.
But then when they got home and started reviewing the footage,
Here we go, the footage reveal. I bet this is where things take a turn for the spooky.
you bet while watching the footage, they noticed a figure in the background. But not just any figure. This one appeared to be missing its head.
Whoa, a headless figure.
Yeah.
That's straight out of a nightmare, and they didn't see it while they were actually filming.
Nope. They claim they only noticed it later while watching the video, which, adds to the creep factor, right?
Totally. It's like, what else might be lurking in that footage that they didn't see in the moment?
Right. What are we missing? What's just beyond our perception?
So do you think they actually captured a real ghost on camera, or is there a more, shall we say, earthly explanation?
Well, let's consider something called pareidolia.
Pareidolia.
It's basically the tendency for our brains to see patterns in random data.
Okay.
Like, have you ever looked at clouds and seen faces or animals?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Or stared at a wall and thought you saw something moving in the shadows?
Yep.
Our brains are wired to make connections even when there might not actually be any there.
Especially when we're in a situation where we're already primed to be scared or on edge.
Exactly, like in a dark, abandoned school that's rumored to be haunted.
Yeah.
Our brains are practically begging to see a ghost.
So could it be that the headless figure was just a trick of the light, a shadow playing on the wall that their brains interpreted as something more sinister?
It's definitely possible. But then again, there's always that little voice in the back of our heads that says, but what if it was real?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of these stories, isn't it? They leave us wondering, questioning, and maybe even a little bit spooked.
Okay, one more story to go for this first part of our deep dive.
Okay.
What unsettling encounter are we exploring next?
This last one takes us to the Visual Arts Institute in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Imagine you're a janitor working the overnight shift. The building is empty, silent, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. or the hum of the ventilation system.
Okay.
You're making your rounds, checking that everything is secure.
Okay. I can already feel the tension building. It's late, you're alone, you start hearing noises.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of noises?
At first, it's just faint sounds, whispers, coming from the bathrooms, rumbling in the classrooms. He checks, but there's nothing there. Then he starts hearing louder tapping coming from the basement.
Oh man, I'd be so freaked out. Basements are creepy enough in broad daylight, let alone when you're alone in an empty building in the middle of the night. Did he go down to investigate?
He did. He followed the sounds of the vents.
Okay.
He could hear something moving and something tapping against the metal.
This is giving me major chills. Okay, he's found the source of the noise, the vents. What happens next?
Okay, so the janitors tracked these creepy noises down to the vents in the basement of this art school. I'm on the edge of my seat here. He hears something moving inside. What did he do?
Well, it takes a deep breath, grabs a screwdriver, and starts unscrewing the vent cover. And what he finds inside isn't a ghost or a monster. It's a homeless man.
Oh, wow.
Who had been seeking shelter in the school's ventilation system.
That's a relief. I mean, not for the janitor, who was probably terrified, but it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things have perfectly rational explanations. It is, but even with a logical explanation, the janitor's fear was still real, right?
Yeah.
It's based on the situation, the setting, the unknown.
Right.
It makes you think about how our minds work. You know, how we fill in the blanks with our fears and expectations.
Yeah, it's like our imaginations can run wild, especially when we're in a spooky situation and we hear a noise and automatically jump to the worst case scenario.
Exactly. And it's not just about being in a creepy place, you know? It's about our own personal fears, our cultural beliefs, even the stories we've been told. All of that feeds into how we interpret the world around us.
So we've explored some pretty unsettling school stories, and we've touched on how our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we're dealing with the unknown.
Yeah.
But what does this all mean? What can we take away from these encounters with the unexplained?
Well, I think these stories offer a fascinating glimpse into the human psyche. You know, they reveal our vulnerabilities, our anxieties about safety and control, and our enduring fascination with what lies beyond our understanding.
It's like these stories are tapping into something primal. You know, something deep within us that's both drawn to and terrified by the unknown.
Absolutely. And schools with their long hallways and empty classrooms and sometimes eerie silence, they become the perfect backdrop for these fears to play out.
Yeah.
Think about it. Schools are places where we're supposed to feel safe, where we learn and grow.
Right.
But there's also this inherent vulnerability in that setting.
It's true. We're surrounded by our peers constantly being judged and evaluated, and there's all that pressure to succeed, to fit in, to navigate all the complexities of social dynamics.
Exactly. And then you layer on those universal fears of the dark, of being alone, of the things that go bump in the night.
Yeah.
It's no wonder schools become such fertile ground for spooky stories and urban legends.
Oh, speaking of urban legends, I remember this one that was super popular when I was in high school.
Oh, yeah.
It was about this girl who disappeared from the library one night.
Oh, my God.
They never found her, but people swore they could still hear her crying in the stacks.
That's creepy.
I know.
You know, urban legends are often more than just scary stories.
Yeah.
They're a way of processing our fears, you know, making sense of the world around us, and even of passing on warnings or advice.
Yeah, like that one about the hookman who hides in the backseat of your car. It's a scary story, but it also reflects a real anxiety about personal safety, especially for young people.
Right, so when we tell stories about ghosts in the hallways or creatures lurking in the vents, it's not just about scaring each other.
Right.
It's about connecting with our fears, sharing them, and maybe even finding ways to cope with them.
It's like a coded language for our anxieties. And by sharing those stories, by acknowledging those fears, we take away some of their power.
Exactly. Fear is a natural response to danger. You know, it's a survival mechanism. But when fear becomes irrational, when it starts to control our thoughts and behaviors, that's when it becomes a problem.
So how do we deal with those irrational fears, the ones that keep us up at night?
Well, one way is to understand the root of those fears. You know, what are we truly afraid of? Is it the dark itself, or what might be lurking in the dark? Is it the ghost in the hallway, or the idea of being alone and vulnerable?
Once we identify the source of our fear, we can start to challenge those negative thoughts, those irrational beliefs, right?
Exactly. We can ask ourselves, is this fear based on evidence? Is it likely to happen? What are the actual consequences if it does happen? Sometimes just talking about our fears, sharing them with someone we trust, can help to lessen their power over us.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of why we're so drawn to creepy stories, you know? It's a safe way to confront our fears, to explore them without actually putting ourselves in danger.
Exactly. It's like a dress rehearsal for real life. We can practice facing our fears in a controlled environment, which can make it easier to deal with them when they pop up in our everyday lives.
So when we hear a creepy story, it's not just about getting scared. It's about understanding ourselves, exploring our vulnerabilities, and ultimately learning how to manage our fears. Well said. These stories, whether they're based in reality or purely fictional, offer valuable insights into the human condition. They remind us that we're all vulnerable, that we all face challenges and anxieties. But they also remind us that we're not alone in our fears.
We all have those moments when we're afraid to look up, afraid to check under the bed, afraid to answer the door.
But it's in those moments of vulnerability, of facing our fears, that we discover our strength, our resilience.
It's like the more we understand our fears, the less power they have over us.
Precisely, knowledge is power, even when it comes to the things that go bump in the night.
So next time you're feeling spooked, remember you're not alone. We all have fears, and that's okay. It's what we do with those fears that matters.
Do we let them control us, or do we use them as opportunities for growth and self-discovery?
That's a great question to consider. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to our final segment. Are you ready to dive into some of the bigger questions surrounding these creepy school stories?
Lead the way. I'm always up for exploring the mysteries of the unexplained.
Okay, we've talked about creepy school stories, and we've touched on how our minds can make us see and hear things that might not actually be there. But I think it's time to address the elephant in the empty classroom. Are ghosts real?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And despite centuries of ghost stories and supposed sightings and even paranormal investigations, there's still no definitive answer.
It's like for every piece of evidence that seems to point to the existence of ghosts, there's a scientific explanation or a healthy dose of skepticism waiting to debunk it.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting, because even in our modern scientific world where we can explain so much about the universe,
Right.
there's still this lingering fascination with the paranormal, with the things that go bump in the night.
It's like a part of us wants to believe, even if our logical minds are telling us to be skeptical. So how do you approach this whole ghost debate? Are you a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between?
You know, I think it's less about picking a side and more about being open to the possibilities.
Huh.
Science gives us a framework for understanding the natural world, but it doesn't necessarily have all the answers. And there are definitely experiences that people have had, stories they've told, that defy easy explanation.
Yeah, like those school stories we've been discussing. Even if we can explain away some of the details, there's still this underlying feeling of unease, this sense that maybe there's something more to it than meets the eye.
Exactly. And I
Well-
think that's what keeps us coming back to these stories. What keeps us fascinated by the paranormal
Yeah.
is that little whisper of what if
Yeah.
that sparks our imaginations and makes us question what we think we know about the world.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that ghosts are real. What does that say about us, about our place in the universe?
Well, for one thing, it would suggest that consciousness, or at least some aspect of it, can exist beyond the physical body, that there's something more to us than just flesh and blood.
Whoa, that's a pretty big concept to wrap your head around. It's like it opens up a whole new realm of possibilities about what happens after we die, about the nature of reality itself.
Right, it challenges our understanding of life and death, of the seen and unseen, and for many people that's a comforting thought. The idea that we don't just cease to exist, that there's something more beyond this physical realm.
But it can also be a scary thought, right? I mean, if ghosts are real, what does that mean for our own safety, our own sense of control over our lives?
Absolutely. The unknown can be both fascinating and terrifying, and I think that's reflected in the stories we tell, the legends we pass down. They're a way of grappling with these big questions, of trying to make sense of the things that scare us, the things that we don't fully understand.
It's like these stories give us a safe space to explore the boundaries of our beliefs, to confront our fears without actually putting ourselves in danger.
Exactly, and whether we ultimately believe in ghosts or not,
Hmm.
I think these stories can teach us a lot about ourselves, about our hopes and fears, and about our enduring fascination with the mysteries of life and death.
So we may never know for sure if ghosts are real, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the mystery is part of what makes it so compelling.
I think you're right. It's that sense of wonder, that curiosity about what lies beyond our current understanding that keeps us exploring, questioning, and searching for answers. And who knows, maybe one day we'll find that definitive proof, that smoking gun that finally settles the debate. But until then, I think we can all enjoy a good ghost story and appreciate the way it makes us think about the world around us.
Well said. I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into these unsettling school stories. But before we go, I want to leave you with this thought. Whether you believe in ghosts or not,
These stories tap into something universal, something that speaks to our deepest fears and fascinations. So the next time you find yourself in an empty hallway or you hear a strange noise in the night, take a moment to listen. What are your fears telling you? And what will you do with that knowledge?
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the unsettling, the unexplained, and the enduring power of a good ghost story. Until next time, keep your minds open, your curiosity piqued, and never be afraid to ask the tough questions.